Welcome back to the Drum Show, the show that's all about you and your drumming and your music and you seeing progress on a daily basis. Today's show is going to be a little bit different. Usually this is a Q&A format, and I love that format. But so much of my career has actually been spent not just teaching, but actually playing. So I started playing professionally at the age of 15 was when I got my first paid gig. It was a Christmas dinner theater. And I often joke, you probably heard me joke before, that the first place my wife ever saw me, Kelly, was at that gig. There was a part where I had to stand up and wear like reindeer antlers and also a reindeer nose because Rudolph was in the piece and I was playing sleigh bells, and I'm sure a lot of you are getting the picture now. Anyway, so the first time Kelly ever saw me was actually when I stood up to do that part. Which I dug my heels in on doing so much. I did not do that. I was the most lackluster Rudolph ever. But I think it was in the song, Harry Connick Jr. song, Santa Claus. Santa Claus must have been old Santa Claus. And anyway, so I often joke that I found my career and I found my wife in the same night. I didn't know I was getting paid for that gig. I got $50 for doing rehearsals and all this stuff. And I remember standing there staring at this check going, wait, people get paid to do this? I thought I was just doing it for fun. And so that was my first paid gig, and it was followed a few months after by another full stage show, Little Shop of Horrors, where I played drums for. Anyway, so I've been playing professionally with professional musicians since the age of 15, and I started playing full-time at the age of 19, so most of my career has been spent on the stage. Like, we're talking tens of thousands of hours of stage time and practice time. Before I got out of high school, I had thousands of hours of stage and rehearsal time, just because of the musicians that I got hooked up with in high school. So I'm really grateful for that. But with that, any of you that have ever played gigs or have had any type of a career in music or just weekend warrior, whatever, there comes with this territory, things happen on the gig, around the gig, traveling to the gig, in the bus, on the road, in the club, and these become stories that you tell at parties. And for years, I've had just lots of stories. And so I thought that we would start doing a Tales from the Gig section of the podcast. My students in my online drum school, you can check that out, stevensdrumshed.com. I would love to help you with your drumming, open to all levels, and I'm dedicated to helping you see progress on a daily basis. But I talk to my students all the time about my gig experience, but it's just not something that I've talked about a lot, on the interwebs, on my YouTube videos, all those things. Oftentimes people see you show up and they just assume that's where you started. It was YouTube. But I actually have a large career well before YouTube ever happened, or teaching ever happened, or any of that. So, all right, so the story I think that we'll kick off with is one that I was reminded of the other day. So I got my first full-time gig playing down in New Orleans on Bourbon Street when I was 19. I dropped out of college and I moved down there. Let me adjust my microphone, excuse me. And I moved down there, and I was a pastor's kid from southern Mississippi. I was homeschooled growing up. So we're talking about like a very sheltered upbringing. I got into punk rock and the grunge movement, all of that in high school, but still a very sheltered, upbringing as far as that stuff. I hung out with crowds that dabbled in drugs and partying and all that stuff, and I loved to hang and have a good time, but I was pretty straight edge when it came to all that. So going down there was just like the biggest shock to the system for me, and it was a great learning ground, but I had just a lifetime of experience and stories from 2.5 years down there. So one afternoon, I started at the famous store on the corner of Conti and Bourbon Street. The famous store is an old jazz club, although we were playing top 40 stuff. John Wayner owned it at the time. After they opened a club down in somewhere in Florida, and anyway, the bands turned over there, and so I wound up going down the street a couple blocks to a place called BBC, Bourbon Street Blues Company, and I started playing with a band. I actually didn't know what their name meant for a long time. They were called RTL, and later I found out that it stood for Redneck Trucker Love. It came from some joke from way back with the bass player and singer. Great group of people, and we played the afternoon shift for the most part. We would play 6 nights a week, 4 afternoons, two night shifts. The afternoon shift, that band usually started around 4, and you would play till about 9, and then the night band came on at 9:30. And a lot of times during the days, you're getting like the Shoppers, you're getting that kind of stuff. And this particular, but you never knew because it was also a port for, cruise ships. When the cruise ships would come in, they only had like 4 or 6 hours on land, and it was just a frenzied, harried, just people going nuts, and then they would just drag them back to the ships passing. It was crazy. So this one day, I believe it was a weekend. That's usually whenever the crazier stuff happened, if it started happening during the day. So we're sitting there playing, and in walks this group of guys, and they were, everyone noticed this group of guys because they were dressed very distinctly. One of them had on a Tarzan type of a, loincloth that went over his shoulder, but, that type of a leopard print loincloth thing. And then he was carrying as his club, there's a drink on Bourbon Street called the hand grenade. They came in these massive, a big long neck of a drink. We're talking like a foot and a half long neck of a drink. And then at the bottom, looked like a hand grenade. The whole thing was neon green. Anyway, he had flipped that upside down, and that was his club. And so I guess he was I don't know. I guess he was Tarzan. You could tell they had been at it since probably like 5 or 6 that morning with the state they were in. So that was guy number 1. Guy number 2 was wearing, and these weren't small guys. These were like big buff guys. Guy number 2, and they were manly, like they were dudes. And guy number 2 was wearing an American flag bikini, top and bottom, and he had on a blonde wig, and like a long girl's blonde wig. And then guy number 3 was in a red dress, like a red mini skirt dress, with I think it was a black wig. And this, so anyway, the scene is it's the afternoon. We're playing, nice shopping afternoon crowd, and in walks this group, right? And they're going nuts. They're just going nuts, bouncing around. Everybody's sitting down, looking, laughing, and so one of the guys though I noticed was carrying this big jar of pink liquid. It was like a big glass jar, pink liquid, and there were pink, reddish pink things floating in this jar. I didn't know what it was. But I didn't really think anything of it. I was just sitting there kind of watching the show that was going on while we were playing. Anyway, so these guys they're there for, an hour or so. And we kick into the AC/DC song, Highway to Hell. And I looked down for something. I usually kept a set list on the ground, and so I'm assuming I was looking down for that, but I was looking down at the ground for some reason. I know this because I heard what happened, and I smelled what happened, but I didn't actually see what happened. It took me a second to understand the gravity of what was going on. So I looked down for a split second during Highway to Hell, and all of a sudden, I hear a crash, just a loud crash on stage. And I looked to the side where my guitar player was, and he's screaming at someone in the crowd, and I'm kind of staring at him, and then he kicks something off the stage, and then I look over at the singer. I believe his name was Ted, and he's holding on to the microphone stand, and his feet are slipping just everywhere. He can't hardly stand up. He's slipping. He's trying to sing this song, and because that part of the stage was tiled, the top part was, the front part had tile on it. The top part had carpet. And I'm still trying to figure out what in the world's going on. And these 3 characters are down at the front of the stage. And so the singer's slipping and sliding. The guitar player's screaming at these guys, kicking these reddish pink chunks, just just back out in the crowd. And I just can't figure out and then it hit me, the stench hit me. And it was a pickled, rotten smell of I didn't know what it was. And we're just playing with this stench, and my guitar player screaming and kicking chunks of, it looks like meat at people, and the singer is screaming and he's trying to hold on to the stand because there's this pinkish liquid all over the stage, and we're still rocking Highway to Hell because you gotta finish the tune. Like, you gotta finish the tune. There's no way not to. Now security's coming up with these three guys. The three guys are still laughing. They think it's hilarious that, and there's glass all over the stage. I have no clue what happened. We end the song, the singer says something, and then we walk off stage because that was obviously gonna be the end of our set until they cleaned the stage. We go upstairs, which is where we took our breaks. I think there may have been 3 levels to this club, if I'm remembering correctly. Some of the clubs on Bourbon Street have 2 with a balcony. Some have 3 where you can kind of go up the rooftop. And so we get up there, and I'm still confused as to what in the world just happened. So I asked him, I said, well, what happened down there? What was going on? And the guy that had been carrying the big jar, he was in the dress. Now, look, we had a female singer, we had a male singer, Ted, and I can't remember our female singer in that particular band. I was just talking about her with an old drummer buddy of mine from New Orleans a couple nights ago when we met for dinner. He was coming through town. She had been enjoying these 3 guys because they were not bad-looking guys. They were, cut up, they were muscular, and this one guy in the red dress, in particular, she had taken a liking to. He was kind of lean and cut up, and muscular arms, and she's smiling and hugging up to him. And I didn't know at the time because I wasn't out in the crowd, but he kept turning around and then he would bend over and, dance in this. Again, this is Bourbon Street. It's a strange scene. And it turns out the guy had on nothing under the dress. So she was having a great time at her, personal strip club that I couldn't see because it was, facing me. It was just this dude in a red dress. And I'm like, I don't really know what the big deal is here, but, she's getting a kick out of it. Anyway, that was what was happening there before the massive attack by this pink liquid with chunks of meat in it. And so I asked them, I'm like, what was that? It seemed like a good time up until that happened. And they said, those guys had a big jar of pickled pig's parts. Now, if you've ever been to the South, there's some things that are unique to the South. And one of those is pickled things. You would go into these old Southern, gas stations and things like there, and there would be a jar of pickled something. Sometimes it was pickles. Sometimes it was some type of pickled meat. So we're talking about pickled pig's lips, maybe pickled pig's feet, maybe pickled other pig's parts, pickled sausage. I don't know all the pickled meats that there are out there. I just remember as a kid, you walk in, that'd be like one of the things up by the counter. Like you could grab a Laffy Taffy or a Snickers, or you could grab these, pickled pig's lips or whatever, and just, I guess, munch on those. Crackling skins was another one, which is, fried pig skin, and anyway, so I knew what this stuff was. I'd seen it before. I'd never eaten it. These guys had a big jar of pickled pig's parts, and at some part during Highway to Hell, the guy got super excited, red dress that my singer was so interested in, and he chunked the jar on stage, and the whole thing shattered just everywhere, sending pig parts all over the stage and sending pickle juice, all bloody pickle juice just all over the stage. And that's whenever my guitar player started screaming and started kicking meat all around the stage. And that's when my singer couldn't stand up. This was the guy singer, not the girl singer. I think she was over talking to the guys. That's whenever the singer was having trouble standing up. And that's whenever the stench hit me that, oh no, we just had pickled pig thrown up on stage at us. Not because it wasn't good music, just because it was Bourbon Street, and this stuff happens sometimes. Like, it just happens on the gig. So there you go. There's the story about pickled pig's parts. And if you ever find yourself in that situation, you should be careful because it stinks more than you would think it is. And it's also way slippier than it's more slippery than just like water. It's like a oozy pink, stuff that it's very, I would think you could use it on a slip and slide pretty good, but anyway, I digress. That is my story from Bourbon Street. I don't know, if you dig these stories, let me know. There's definitely not really much useful from them. I've got 1,000,001 of them from being on the road and from 2.5 years on Bourbon Street, and then playing Broadway here in Nashville, and at every other dive and hole in the wall all across America. So I would love to tell more of these, but you'll need to be the person that tells me if this is of interest to hear about. If you ever need help with your drumming, you can go to stevensdrumshed.com. I got a drum school there, and I'd love to have you be a part of the community. Gosh, I was trying to think the other day. I opened up in 2011 was when I opened up the membership program on the website. And so I've been teaching online for a hot minute. Whether you're a beginner, intermediate player, advanced, whether you just want to be a weekend warrior, just want to play in your basement, whatever that is, I can help you get there. And the goal is, with the program, is that I want you to see daily progress. Whatever your goals are. If you're a doctor and you just want to come home and blow off some steam, that's great. Let's go towards those goals. If you're a kid and you wanna learn the drums, then that's great. If you're a grandparent and you just want a hobby, if you're an empty nester, if you're coming back to the drums after a long time away, it really doesn't matter what situation you're in. I'm just concerned with catering the program to you and then plugging you into the awesome community of drummers that are there. So I'd love to have you join, and I would love to help you with your drumming. But if you ever have questions you want featured on the podcast, you can also send those to help@stevensdrumshed.com. And I'll see you in the next show.